There's a powerful moment that happens quietly in people's lives. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just a decision made in silence. You stop hesitating. You stop researching endlessly. You stop waiting for the perfect time. And instead, you commit. Not halfway, not temporarily, but fully. You decide this is the path you're going to follow, even if the outcome is uncertain. And what's fascinating is that this decision doesn't just change your schedule or your priorities. It actually changes what happens inside your brain. Because commitment is not just a psychological choice. It's a neurological shift. The moment you truly commit to something meaningful, your brain begins reorganizing itself around that decision. Your attention sharpens. Your motivation changes. Your perception of obstacles transforms. And suddenly, the same challenges that once felt overwhelming begin to look manageable. To understand why this happens, we need to explore what commitment does to the brain's most important systems. Before commitment, the brain often exists in a constant state of internal conflict. One part of you wants to move forward. Another part wants to stay safe. One voice says pursue the goal. Another voice asks whether it's worth the risk. This internal tug-of-war consumes enormous mental energy. Every day becomes filled with repeated questions. Should I start now? Is this the right path? What if something better appears later? When you haven't committed, the brain keeps evaluating alternatives. It constantly reopens the decision. But commitment changes that. When you decide firmly, the brain stops revisiting the same question over and over. The mental debate ends. And that alone frees up a surprising amount of cognitive energy. Energy that can now be redirected toward action. Commitment activates one of the brain's most powerful regions, the prefrontal cortex. This area sits behind your forehead and acts as the brain's executive center. It handles planning, goal setting, and decision-making. When you remain undecided, the prefrontal cortex spends much of its energy evaluating possibilities. But once commitment is made, its function changes. Instead of asking, should we do this? The brain begins asking a different question. How do we make this work? This shift is subtle but profound. The mind moves from exploration to execution, from doubt to strategy. And when that happens, your brain starts organizing thoughts, resources, and actions around the chosen direction. Commitment also influences the brain's dopamine system. Dopamine is often misunderstood as simply the pleasure chemical. In reality, dopamine is more about motivation and pursuit. When the brain identifies a meaningful goal, dopamine circuits activate to encourage movement toward that goal. But here's the interesting part. Dopamine responds more strongly when a direction is clear. If you're uncertain about your goal, dopamine's signals remain weak. The brain hesitates. But once you commit, the brain interprets the goal as a priority. Dopamine levels increase. Suddenly, you feel more driven. Tasks related to the goal become more engaging. The brain begins rewarding progress along the chosen path. Another fascinating change involves the brain's reticular activating system, often called the RAS. This system acts like a filter for attention. Every second, your brain receives far more sensory information than it can process. The RAS decides what gets noticed and what gets ignored. When you commit to a goal, the RAS begins prioritizing information related to that goal. You start noticing opportunities that previously went unnoticed. Relevant ideas appear more frequently. Conversations suddenly seem more useful. It can almost feel like the world is responding to your commitment. But what's really happening is that your brain's attention filter has been reprogrammed. Another benefit of commitment is the reduction of cognitive load. When you remain undecided, the brain must continuously keep multiple options active. Each option carries potential plans, risks, and consequences. This mental juggling creates noise. It makes thinking feel scattered. But when you commit, many of those competing possibilities disappear. The brain no longer needs to maintain them. Instead, it channels attention into a single direction. This simplification makes thinking clearer. Your mind becomes quieter, and with less internal noise, focus improves dramatically. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a scientific day.